Hello and welcome back to the NNP Symposium 2021 on day 3. During this hour, we are joined by Bob Evans, scientist and historian for the SS Central America. In today's talk, he's going to be covering the unusual discoveries, wonders, and mysteries of the SS Central America. Bob, you are good to unmute and turn on your camera.
Okay, I think I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. In any case, quick reminder for the audience members that you can use the Q&A feature on your device to submit any questions. We'll hold those for the very end of the presentation, and we'll answer as many as we have time for. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and leave it to Bob. Just let me know if you need anything.
I'm going to start off with a little audio file here. It is fascinating to hear this sound ringing to us across 163 years. It is the actual bell of the SS Central America, able to ring again for the first time in a century and a half or more. A lot of what I'm going to talk to you today about has to do with how the SS Central America carried the greatest lost treasure in United States history. The peculiar circumstances of technology, the gold rush, all of the people and such that make this such an important event in numismatic and in United States history. It sank in a hurricane about 150 miles off of the Carolina coast in water 7,200 feet deep, 2,200 meters. I've actually experienced a hurricane out there on the very same site. We were in Hurricane Hugo, or very close to being in Hurricane Hugo. Fortunately, by the time this picture was taken, we were safely harbored in Wilmington, North Carolina. The hurricane went on, as you might recall, to just simply ravage the area in the state to the south, Charleston, South Carolina, and the eye hit just north of there. These storms are the worst Mother Nature has to offer. You can see here the proximity or the lack of proximity to the coast. It's way out there. It's actually at the latitude of Georgia, although Cape Fear in North Carolina is the closest point of land because of the way the coast curves in that part of the world. In 2020, the non-numismatic artifacts were acquired in a court-approved sale by California Gold Marketing Group, for whom I work as the curator of the treasure. So I was able to drain the tank of distilled water that the bell had been sitting in for the last couple of decades, desalinating and safely stored, hoist it up and examine its details. The bell had provided the first absolute confirmation that we had found the right site with these inscriptions around the top part of the bell. Morgan Iron Works, New York, 1853. The Morgan Iron Works in New York had provided the engines for the SS Central America, which was launched initially as the SS George Law. It's interesting that the bell does not have the ship's name on it. I don't know if this was a stock bell that Morgan had sitting around, perhaps intended for a church, but it served on this steamship as the bell. 1853 was, in fact, the first voyage of the Central America between New York and Panama. And we were able to hoist it up. I struck the inside of it with a rubber mallet and produced this wonderful sound calling to us from the middle of the 19th century. It brings us back to the time of the gold rush. The California gold rush was an amazing time when tens of thousands of mostly young men flocked to the new state of California to dig out its riverbeds and to get at the yellow gold that was hiding deep within cracks and crevices. The heavy gold had settled to the bottom of all of the stream beds. And here we see them on digging out an entire river and forcing it down the left bank on the right as we're looking at it here. The effect that the California gold rush had on the United States is hard to overstate. This is the face value of gold and silver coins minted annually by the US Mint. And you can see the incredible spike that occurs in dollar value once gold is discovered in California. The entire amount can be measured actually by the area under this curve. And we can see that the nation's wealth essentially doubled in about a year and a half, and then trebled and quadrupled and so on and so forth. We went from being a small former colony, kind of like a third world country, to becoming a world financial power. The gold traveled between San Francisco and New York via the Panama route. Very quickly, enterprising individuals figured out that the fastest and safest way to move between San Francisco and New York was through the Isthmus of Panama, which by 1855, they had also connected with a railroad across the isthmus. And so it was possible at that point for actual genteel society, ladies, families, and such, as well as heavy equipment and gold and mail. The mail route, the United States mail route, was established through this. And in fact, the SS Central America was probably carrying about 30,000 letters from people in California when it sank, as well as the treasure and the passengers. This is another graph showing the importance of this Isthmian route. Basically, this was the way anything heavy was sent. Gold certainly is heavy. It was the most secure way to get the gold to the eastern states and the rest of the world. It drops off radically in 1869, as you can see. This is the completion of the Continental Railroad across the United States. The listed commercial shipment on the SS Central America was $1.219 million and various change. Depending on the purity of the gold, that works out to somewhere in the vicinity of 60,000 ounces. This was the principal economic incentive for our search for the Central America and its treasure to begin with. When found on the bottom of the ocean, the commercial shipment was just an absolutely stunning sight. This is a scene we called the Garden of Gold, where we can see coins in original stacks, cemented by the mineral elements of the site. The boxes have been eaten away, and they're left in still in original configurations in some cases. You can also see how shiny they are. This is actually because this site is in a perpetual state of collapse, a state of marine peril, in fact. And so recovering these, we found them to be in incredible condition. There were blocks and stacks of gold bars as well. It turns out that the gold bars, the gold ingots, these are a very important component. In fact, the dominant face value component of that commercial shipment. And yet we also see the fantastic life forms that have come to rest on this. I wish I had time to talk about all of the adjunct science that we've done with this treasure and with the Central America, but there's simply not time here today. But you can see that the animals find the treasure to be a very handy, hard substrate on which to make their homes. The signature coin of the SS Central America is without doubt the 1857 S Double Eagle, the $20 gold piece. Many of them in spectacular condition. having just been made at the mint. The companies that were shipping this gold had turned in whatever raw gold or ingots that they had to the mint, had received gold coin in return for that gold from the mint once its purity and value was determined. And they boxed up these coins, as we saw in that photograph of them on the bottom. They were completely uncirculated. And you know, this is the way that absolutely fantastic coins, looking as if they were made yesterday, end up resting at the bottom of the ocean for a decade or a century and a half. As I stated earlier, the ingots were very important to the commercial shipment. Gold bars made by 5 different assay companies all bear 5 important pieces of information: a serial number indicating that there was a deposit number and a method of accounting for it. Of course, the maker's mark, in this case, Justin Hunter. The number of ounces, and here we see 36.08 ounces, Troy, to the nearest hundredth of an ounce. 914 fine indicates that it was 91.4% gold. Most of the additional alloy in the gold of the native gold of California was silver. But the dollar value is figured at $20.67.2 to the ounce, coming out here to $681.69. Here's an ingot from actually the most popular or the most abundant assayer. This is Kellogg and Humbert. Both were giants in the gold trade in California. You will recognize these names if you're a California Gold Rush numismatist. Again, indicating all the same kinds of information, no matter what the size or the shape of the bar. On smaller bars, here's another bar from Kellogg and Humbert. They could only fit 4 pieces of the information on the obverse side. Just a brief diversion here. The reverse side is the original top surface. When the ingot is poured into the mold and it cools in there, they stamp the deposit number or the serial number on the back side of the ingot before they take it out of the mold. But going on, this little 13-ounce bar needed the maker's mark, and so Mr. Kellogg's name is on one side. There wasn't room for the entire stamp, so they put the rest of the stamp on the other side. So both Mr. Kellogg and Mr. Humbert are memorialized on this ingot, but on different sides of it. As with any kind of human endeavors, there were interesting mistakes that were made now and then. These ingots were handmade, hand-rendered, hand-stamped by 28 or so or more different punches. This is ingot number 653, which has rather heavy incrustation on the bottom side of the obverse, but you see it's a 98-ounce bar. We recovered this ingot in the earlier expeditions, I believe in 1988 or 1990. I would have to check on that. But the reverse of bar number 653 has 646 punched on the reverse. There we see a close-up of that punch, 646. It can be seen through the incrustation, and we know, well, there was something amiss here. So this bar remained a mystery for a long time. In the 2014 expedition, we recovered ingot number 646. We see that it's a 138-ounce bar, somewhat, 40 ounces or so larger than 653. There's 646 on the obverse. And sure enough, number 653 is on the reverse. So somewhere there was an error in record keeping. Hopefully they figured out this 40-ounce difference, or else it was the same depositor and it didn't really matter. But somehow or other, this mix-up really shows the kind of interesting mistakes that can happen. You see that this difference actually made a difference of $739.27. So it was not trivial. A lot of what I talk about today has to do not with what is in the history books, but rather what is in the objects and how they speak. In the early expeditions, we recovered over 7,000 coins, 7,500 gold coins. I would just call your attention here. This is an article from the Numismatist in 2008. 5,193 of those 7,500 coins were 1857 San Francisco $20 gold pieces. There's a variety of other things. Some of the more esoteric pieces, the less common things, may have been intermingled passenger gold that fell through from higher decks as the shipwreck collapsed. The shipwreck is now, it can be described as a collapsed four-story building, almost the length of a football field, and has collapsed about 50 feet wide. But it's also surrounded by about a 10-acre debris field. Here are the face value of the ingots. So we see there's $982,000 of ingots and $144,000 of coins. So you can see how important gold ingots were to the commercial trade. Our recoveries from the earlier years, 88 through 91, came up a little short on the entire commercial shipment. So we knew there was still a significant amount of gold remaining on the SS Central America shipwreck. I'm not going to go into all of the legal matters. There's simply not enough time and possibly not enough interest here, but the expeditions were halted in 1991. We went through many admiralty trials, and then the project founder, Tommy Thompson, went through some additional trials and court dealings. Eventually, a receiver was appointed for the original company, the original investment company. Mr. Thompson is operationally out of the matter. The receiver hired Craig Mullen, a legend in deep ocean operations. Craig Mullen is seen here with me. He's responsible, for instance, of being the lead man on the recovery of the Space Shuttle Challenger when it plunged into the ocean. Various airliner accidents, lost shipwrecks, submarines, various. He founded Eastport International. This is one of the top guys in deep ocean ops. You can also see in this photo that he's maybe of a different species than I am. We hired a contractor, Odyssey Marine, which had a ship, an ROV, and a crew, and they were ready to go in 2014. And so we went back out to sea. To address this commercial shipment, we had to go much deeper. We excavated all the way down to the hull in the commercial shipment area. Here we see some double eagles, $20 gold pieces deep down in the coal. Coal was everywhere on this shipwreck. We can see that coal, as it churned on the surface and was filling with water, it was getting everywhere. Another little box of ingots that's buried deeply in the debris. And this is me in the coin examination room, being the first guy to handle these pieces in 160 years. This was such a great privilege to be able to look at this stuff for the first time, handle it, identify it. The process here is that I would identify a piece, hand it to the archaeologist to be safely stored. He would photograph pieces if they were something new. And one of the project managers from the contractor would enter the information into a computer database. The coins tell us a little bit about the people that experienced this. They were men and women and children. They all went through, they were fairly ordinary people, but they went through a very extraordinary circumstances, fighting desperately for 30 hours to save their sinking ship, heroically rescuing all of the women and children. And in total, about 100 people made it to a passing vessel, the brig Marine, by way of the lifeboats. There were those who perished when it sank, and another 50 men were rescued that evening from that night by another passing vessel, the bark Ellen, out of Norway, actually. And it was those survivor accounts that allowed us to put together, I don't have time to go into it very much here, but using their accounts as well as celestial coordinates that were taken during the course of the disaster, we were able to construct a logical and mathematically based search pattern, which ultimately found the ship, the greatest lost treasure in United States history. But the commercial shipment was not the entire story. There were coin piles out in the debris field. It was easy to see once we zoomed in on these and drew close what sort of things these were. This was the money of the street. This was the people's money. You can imagine as the ship was about to sink, there were hundreds of men on the deck of the ship. And all had with them some kind of package of valise, a satchel, money belt, something or other, and it was packed with their gold and their valuables and these strange rectangular objects, which I'll get to here in a few minutes. But you can see there's jewelry, there's a gold cross down here, a ring over here, and there are coins of absolutely every denomination. We have everything from $20 gold pieces down to the little $quarter California fractional gold that were made by jewelers in San Francisco. Absolutely every kind of money you could expect to be found. This coin pile by itself, I hold, would be a front page news story treasure unto itself. And yet it has a tendency to be lumped in as part of the SS Central America treasure, as if the SS Central America treasure is somehow monolithic. It isn't. There are many treasures on the SS Central America. Coin pile 2 is certainly one of them. You can see the tremendous variety involved here. We picked up 3 $3 gold coins from that earlier chart in the early expeditions. Coin pile 2, it by itself had 16 $3 gold pieces in it. The Red Book, standard reference, says that the $3 piece was never popular. Well, I can tell you there are a couple years in California when it was popular and it was in a lot of use. So in that way, the treasure is in some ways rewriting or at least augmenting history. You also see down at the bottom that there are 17 foreign gold coins and all of those little California fractionals. Lots of gold dollars. We only found 1 gold dollar in the earlier expeditions. There were 44 in coin pile 2. This brings us to the creme de la creme set. There is an incredible set of 1857 San Francisco coins, each of which represent the finest graded piece, the finest known of the $20 gold piece in 67 plus, the $10, the $5, the $3. I'm going to pause for a moment here. When I first saw this $3 coin on my coin bench, when I'm examining it for the very first time, a flake of rust had come off of the field behind Miss Liberty's head. On the obverse here, most of that area was swept clean. I could see the incredible luster. I knew from the studying the Red Book and other sources that the finest known of these was Mint State 64 prior to this particular find. As I handed this to the archaeologist, I said, Neil, be very, very careful with this coin. This is something very special. There is interestingly also a Mint State 65 example of the same date from the Central America. But a large number of these coins that are finest known came from those coin piles, which speaks to the fact that the passengers ultimately on the Central America had visited the mint themselves shortly before their departure, where they turned in their gold to the mint. The assayers were somewhat faster, but they had a larger charge for their gold. So if you had time, you would go to the mint and have it turned into the convenient form of gold coin. Obviously, gold coin receiving it from the mint, you very often get Mint State gold coin from their treasury there. And so we end up with all of these fascinating coins in incredible condition. There, interestingly, were no 1857S $1 pieces, but we found 1856S's. This particular one, the finest known in Mint State 65 plus. They did fascinating things with their gold coins in California. These are counterstamped by merchants and businesses. This one from a druggist on the corner of 7th and J Street in Sacramento, California. It's kind of cute. It has a little mortar and pestle symbol up here under the name of the druggist. Here we see his counterstamp almost crammed onto a little quarter eagle. H.H. Pearson, the dentist, had marked up this 1845 Philadelphia half eagle. The Coinage Act of 1857 made all the foreign coins, all of the fractionals, all of the privately minted material. It removed the legal tender status of foreign coins. In the early decades of the United States, particularly Spanish coins and Spanish colonial coins, traded as legal tender. The 2 bits, the familiar 2 bits for a quarter, was a 2 real piece, and 2 reals were used as quarters almost as often or sometimes more often than US minted quarters. But we see that in California, only a few months later, these were still being traded and used as money. So what was going on? Well, Eckfeldt and Dubois, the assayers of the United States Mint in Philadelphia, had issued a little booklet a few years earlier that listed all of the value of the coins of all the different nations. So we see here, a list of a country, and it'll tell you how much a double Fred or a 10 thaler from Denmark was worth. Or more typical in our case, we see that the British sovereign was $4.84.5, and the 20 francs of France was $3.85. People knew this because there was a book out that gave the values for the foreign coins. Sovereigns were fairly common on the SS Central America. We found them in these passenger coin piles quite a bit. There were really nice ones like this 1855, showing the young Victoria head. That goes all the way back to the first year of Victoria's reign in 1838, and a much more heavily worn coin. Back to William IV, and even back to George IV. So these gold coins would stay in circulation for quite a while. Once they were well worn, they would probably be weighed to determine their actual value in commerce. The oldest gold coin on the Central America is this 1809 2 Scudo. It's actually from Spain, not from one of the Spanish colonies, although there were Spanish colonial pieces as well. The political history of mid-century, mid-19th century France is well represented. We have an 1850 20 franc from the Republic of France, extolling liberty, equality, and fraternity. 2 years later, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte is president of the Republic of France. And a year later, he has declared that he is now Napoleon III, the Empire of the Empire of France. It's interesting to see in numismatics illustrated just how quickly some of this political change can happen. The Netherlands is represented by some 10 guilder pieces. These foreign gold coins, by the way, are about to be sold in a Goldberg sale. I believe it's their May-June sale coming up. So if you have any interest in the international nature of the SS Central America treasure, I invite you and encourage you to tune into that auction and make your desires known. It's somewhat charming to find a 2 escudo piece from the Central American Republic on the SS Central America. But here's one from 1835. The Central American Republic only lasted for a few years, but they were making gold coins, showing the sun over the volcanic mountains and a tree on the other side. Australia was experiencing its own gold rush in the early 1850s, and by 1855, they had established a mint in Sydney where they were making sovereigns. This coin, this 1855 sovereign in mint state 62, is the equivalent of what our 1854 San Francisco half eagle would be. Very rare coin from the very earliest days of the Sydney Mint. Fascinating piece. California fractional gold, which we talked about, was mostly found in very high grades, mint states. But it was clear from its presence in these coin piles that these pieces actually were trading in day-to-day commerce. This would be a quarter. They're extremely tiny, not well designed to be handled by a curator in a lab, but we give it our shot. You can see just how small they are. Here I'm handling one of these quarter dollars. But we also see examples of, for instance, this $half piece from 1856 that shows signs of wear. So it's clear that they were circulating. Privately minted gold was very popular in the early 50s. In the early 1850s, there were instances where the mint had not yet been established, or in this case, the mint had been established, and yet they were having trouble coming to full production. And so here we see Mr. Kellogg again is issuing his own $20 gold pieces out of the native alloy. He didn't have to worry about things like parting acids and other sorts of manufacturing problems that the US branch mint had to worry about in order to make official United States coin. So Kellogg bailed out local business in California, both in 1854 and again in 1855, by issuing coins. Privately minted coins were declared to be not legal tender, and yet we find them in abundance on the Central America. So it's clear that at least in the California trade, their use was persisting. In 2014, in our return expedition, we found a safe. I was at first skeptical when they told me they'd found a safe, because back in those earlier 4 years of expeditions in the late 80s and early 90s, we saw lots of rectangular rusty boxes. None of them turned out to be a safe. But this one, it turned out it was. It had legs on it. It was far too heavy to be moved without it collapsing. But here you can see we have taken the door off of it, and we could see inside into the chambers, and we can see that there are certain parcels that are inside. I'm going to draw your attention first to the parcel that's down here in the lower right corner of the safe, the way it's resting. Really happy that the safe came to rest on its side so that we could work the door off rather than having to go through the side of it. We sort of shoveled under that parcel with kind of like a large spatula, brought it out, found out that it really was very heavy. We measured it. It was not going to be moved very easily in terms of lifting it in any kind of way. It was tending to fall apart anyway. And inside were two very heavy bags. We picked up these bags with the manipulator, put them in the drawer in the front of the robot Zeus, and brought them up to the surface. Here, this bag is in the coin room. We see it's about the size of a volleyball or a soccer ball. And it's just bulging with coins. You can see little hints of the coins on the side. They all appeared to be around 18 millimeters. And whereas it would have been an absolute wonderful miracle had these been quarter eagles, it turns out that they were dimes. There were around 9,000 dimes inside that bag. It immediately became obvious to me that what we'd found was the purser's money. That's what that parcel in the lower corner of the safe was. This was the purser's safe. This was the ship's money. One of the bags had dimes in it, as well as a tiny little bag that was inside that bag that had exactly $400 in small gold, in gold dollars, and quarter eagles and half eagles. And I don't think they ever touched that bag unless they were asked to pay in gold. They did their business in silver. The other bag had quarters and half dollars in it, but it's obvious by the abundance of dimes that they did their business to the nearest dime. This is another bag from inside the safe. It actually had gold coins inside of it. You can only get a very tiny hint in all of the black anaerobic gook that settles on the inside of these things. And yet they're wonderfully preserved. Once these coins are curated, they turn out to be just as beautiful as any other gold coins. Smell the history was something we used to say quite a lot as we were opening this stuff, because the anaerobic bacteria gave off quite an odor. Here's a vest that had been bundled up with twine and sealed with wax. The bulges you see in this vest are pockets that are filled with pokes of gold dust. Gold dust was being carried back east where they got a slightly better price for it, or else they didn't have time to convert it before they left. Somebody had bundled this up, given it to the purser to secure inside of his safe. It was sealed for security, but we got the gold dust. So much gold dust, actually. It was quite remarkable from inside that safe. Here you see that it's nearly 1.5 kilograms of gold dust on my scale. I had so much gold dust that for the display of the Ship of Gold exhibit in 2018 at the Long Beach Coin Show, I was able to use gold dust as the aquarium gravel for this display of pokes and a bar from the assayer Henry Hinch. This is inside water. I figure this would be my one chance ever to use gold as aquarium gravel. But I'll come back to the gold coin pile again. These rectangular pieces are some really fascinating human artifacts. It turns out that they're photographs. Photography was very popular in San Francisco. There are street scene photographs that show many photographic studios in a single view. And so there were dozens of people taking pictures. We don't know who these are pictures of. Were they pictures of passengers? Were they pictures of family in California? Were they friends and they were taking these photographs back east to show people how well the people were doing in California, what exactly this purpose was? But being able to have little portraits as ambrotypes or daguerreotypes. This was a very important function. So some of them have faint images preserved in them. We can see this man barely staring out at us, but some are much more distinct. We see this woman gazing at us from 7,200 feet down in the Atlantic and from the year 1857. Fascinating stuff. There's a man and a woman here in situ on the seabed in the debris field. We recovered a few of these and have preserved them. The non-numismatic artifacts are now in the hands of Collectibles Authentication Guarantee, which is under the umbrella of Certified Collectibles Group, as is NGC. So this is a sister company to NGC that is now handling the non-numismatic artifacts. A woman and a child, a woman with a slightly older child. Here was a fascinating story. This little locket pair of a man and a woman, probably husband and wife, were sort of white looking silver discs. When the archaeologist took the picture of these discs, this image jumped out. You couldn't see the image with the naked eye, or it wasn't immediately visible that there was any change in the surface of this. And yet the digital photography was able to get this out. Neil gasped when he saw this picture appear in his camera because he didn't think that's what he was shooting. And I said, "What's wrong?" And then he showed me the picture in his camera, and it was like the digital photography had resurrected this couple. This incredible looking gaze of what is quite possibly a debutante, a young woman really decked out in jewelry and lace for a very formal setting photograph. She is absolutely in her finery. An amazing picture. To be seeing these faces peering at us from a century and a half ago is very special. The people cared about their gold a lot. I'm going to go kind of fast here, but there were scales that we found. There were even the weights for those scales. I believe these were penny weights. There was jewelry that signified that you were part of the California experience. Here we see a stick pin that was made out of a gold dollar. The piece that was really the signature piece for gentlemen in particular was a nugget pin made of gold nuggets from the time. These stick pins were very popular, and we see them in photographs on formal settings from the time. I haven't seen any on the photographs that we recovered, but from that time, it was a popular piece of jewelry. Here's a nugget that is a pin back set on it, so it could be worn in a different way. Now, this guy was really showing off. Whoever owned this piece originally, 2 nugget pins connected by a gold chain. Quite a flamboyant memento of the California gold rush. Another form of jewelry that was signature to this time was made out of the gold ore itself. Most of the gold occurred in quartz veins, and when the quartz was mined, it could be turned into a gemstone, cut and polished into cabochons by jewelers and lapidarists, and set in gold, such as in these cufflinks or this brooch. Fascinating to me as a geologist was the fact that we actually have some of the source rock. The piece at lower right here has actually been cut smooth by a lapidary saw. This is why it's shining so, it's the flat surface of that shining back at you. So whether or not this was being carried by a jeweler, there was a famous jeweler or a noteworthy jeweler, Samuel Shreve, who was lost when the Central America sank. Shreve and Company is still in business as a jeweler. Relatives, I assume. We don't know if this was his stuff or not, or if it was somebody else's stuff being taken to jewelers back east to be made into jewelry, but interesting stones. There were cultural symbols of the time, like the sweetheart ring with interlocking hearts. There were other signs of cultural affiliation in societies. There were engraved pieces with name L.J. Ramage. There were monogrammed initials on rings, S.E. Interestingly enough, none of these inscribed pieces or these monograms on gold match up with any of the passengers from the Central America. There was no S.E., there was no L.J. Ramage on the Central America. So it calls to question, were these gifts being taken back east for family members or friends, or were they gambling winnings and losings? Gambling was very popular at the time. Maybe that was the source of some of these oddball pieces that don't match up with anybody. Another symbol of how much they cared about their gold, this padlock. We know what the people wore. We picked up trunks in 1990 and 1991 that were studied extensively by science or scholars at Ohio State University. Master's theses and dissertations emerged from this. Here's a story I like. Something else we get to know about these people is how did they groom themselves? Highly perfumed bear's grease for beautifying and strengthening the hair. This is highly perfumed, I should say so. You would work your highly perfumed bear's grease into your hair using a comb, of course, such as this one made of tortoise shell that was cut and carved and furrowed and such, manufactured in that way out of tortoise shell. Or if you were a modern like fellow, you might have one of those newfangled hard rubber combs made with the Goodyear's process. Goodyear had patented synthetic rubber in the 1840s. And by 1857, it was being used for a large variety of moldable goods, including, obviously, a men's hair comb. It's a sign of the Industrial Revolution and the changing technology. I spoke earlier about how many letters were on board. Letter writing was a way that everybody passed the time by writing letters to people. 30,000 letters on the SS Central America were lost. This is another sign of changing technology. This is a metal pen nib instead of a quill. We found many quills, but of course you'd have to cut the quill in the right way to use it as a pen. You could stick this pen nib into the end of a holder and you'd have yourself a pen that would maybe last a little longer than a quill. This one actually looks like it's fairly well used, but it announces that it is the best copper erodium pen. Don't know exactly what erodium was, but I may have to do some research. There were symbols from the ship as well. Here's the sign for the saloon. You'd want to know where the saloon was. You had a room key. This is the key to room number 30, to cabin number 30, probably in first class. These were ordinary people, as I said before, and when you find the mundane, ordinary artifacts, it really brings that across. The people ate with forks and with spoons, just like we do. They played chess to pass the time. They played dominoes. This is fascinating. Like, I think this domino was made with a brace. I mean, these were handmade. Everything doesn't line up perfectly, but it's a wonderful piece. They listened to music. This is the drum of a music box. We recovered the pieces of this music box, and the little tiny holes you see in the drum of this used to have metal pins in them that would pluck the tines that would produce the sound as it would rotate. I haven't figured out yet what song this was, but I think it actually might be possible by comparing it with surviving intact music boxes from the same time that would give us some sense of what pitch each of those tines had as the little metal picks would pluck it. When the Central America sank, it took almost 2 months for the news to reach back to San Francisco. And this article, written by Jim Delgado and published in the Mystic Seaport Museum Bulletin, was an early source I had when I was doing research back in the 80s. This article was already out. And it's fascinating because it talks about what people had to say about the SS Central America after it sank, that it was murder most foul, and they attacked the owners for having such a leaky old hulk. The SS George Law, everybody knows it was a leaky old hulk, and they've changed the name of it and they painted it up. And I'm going to do a brief song here just because I have the piano back here for that purpose. The Central America, painted so fine, went down like 1,000 a brick. And now the old tubs that are now on the line will follow her to in a lick. 'Twould be very fine were the owners aboard to sink where they never would rise. 'Twould any amount of amusement afford and cancel 1,000,000 of lies. Get the idea. But that's not the whole story. And we come back to res ipsa loquitur, the objects. What do the objects have to say about this? And I'll go back to that comb. There's some other information on the comb. Mr. W.G. Barry has scratched his name on the comb. And the date, September 5th, 1857. This was 2 days north out of Panama on their way to New York. Mr. Barry has decided to take his knife out and just write down and commemorate the moment. He's perhaps enjoying a sunny day on the deck. We're using our imagination here, but here's the date, September 5th, 1857. On the other side of the comb, Mr. Barry, we don't know anything about him other than the fact that he was a steerage passenger from Pennsylvania. He had paid $150 for his passage from San Francisco to New York. Mind you, that's 7.5 ounces of gold. So it was a hefty sum, obviously successful. And he was happy to be going home on the Panama route. He was further happy to be on the steamship George Law. It was known as a staunch vessel. He scratched the name of the steamship George Law, not the SS Central America, but its old name onto it. So it's interesting to see how these artifacts correct the historical record, or at least they augment it and suggest that maybe there are other interpretations. This is just a personal trophy piece. The Miami Herald ran a headline, Nerds All Ocean Riches, and there's a picture of me on it. And one of the privileges of being scientist and historian on the SS Central America project is sometimes you get to pose with a lot of gold. This is on my in my laboratory in California, where I was working on curating the treasure in 2018. So that's the end of my show. If we can get set up for questions and answers, we have a little bit of time for it. I actually forgot to do my other song, but so it goes. I'll be happy to entertain whatever questions you come up with. What do I need to do here, Matthew?
Absolutely. You are good to go ahead and stop the share screen, but otherwise I'll go ahead and filter some questions. Like I said, we have about 5 minutes, so we'll go ahead and just get into these. Perfect. All right. Let's see, starting from the top. Where are these gold coins and gold bars now? Were they all sold to collectors and investors?
The answer to this is, for the most part, yes. They were sold into the numismatic market. A few pieces have been donated to appropriate museums, mostly the signature 1857S double eagles. And they're widely available in the numismatic market. There are, as I pointed out, a few pieces have yet to be sold, such as those foreign gold coins coming up at a Goldberg sale. And they're out in the numismatic market. The answer for specifically where they are is I don't know, because once this material leaves my curatorial lab, it's sort of in the hands of other responsible market forces. And so I can't answer specifically where a piece is, but it's out there. Thanks.
Let's see. Another question asked or says, I know it's 1856 and I believe at 1855 Sydney sovereign recovered, but were there any other sovereigns recovered, and if so, any memorable ones?
Of the sovereigns, they're mostly the actual English sovereigns. And I'm not a foreign gold expert. I actually would defer here to that Goldberg catalog of the upcoming sale to find out any of the sort of special attributes of the gold coins, including the sovereigns. Yes, in fact, there were the 2 Australian sovereigns that were found, but then many other sovereigns that were of British manufacture.
Absolutely. A couple of questions, wondering what happened to all the dimes that were recovered?
Those are being marketed, I believe. I've seen people have come up to me when we still had coin shows a couple years ago. There were a couple people came up to me with dimes that they had purchased in the numismatic market. So get busy on your computer searches and see if you can find those, I guess.
Absolutely. Quick Google search can tell you a lot. This next question says, you have probably looked at more gold coins that have been immersed in salt water than anyone else. Can you tell if a gold coin has been immersed even after proper conservation? Do they just have a look that you know it when you see it?
Gold, first of all, every shipwreck is different. The environment of every shipwreck is different. There is no one size fits all for the chemistry of shipwrecks. The reason the SS Central America Gold is in such spectacular condition, or one reason why it is in such spectacular condition, is that it sank in an slightly alkaline environment. Gold does not do well in the presence of halogens. Read that as chlorine, as in sodium chloride, which is in the ocean in abundance, in acidic environments. So the fact that the Central America landed in the middle of a large plain of calcareous ooze made up of the microscopic shells of planktonic sea creatures, and it came to rest down there, it basically landed on a bunch of limestone mud. And that slightly alkaline environment provided enough of a buffering effect that the salt water has not affected this material. That's a simple answer, somewhat simple answer anyway, for how that happens. I can't speak for coins on other shipwrecks. I have seen gold coins that were obviously seawater effect, and there are others that are not. So it depends on the individual environmental circumstances of the shipwreck.
Absolutely. Okay, we just have time for maybe one more question. I believe you might have touched base on this. Were any silver coins recovered, and what is their history? if so?
Well, we dealt with the fact that we had, actually, the coin piles also would yield certain silver coins in addition to the safe, but they are much more badly corroded. Inside that safe, inside that anaerobic environment within the safe, it turns out that the chlorine in the salt water doesn't affect the silver that much in the absence of oxygen. It's actually chlorates that are the villain, if you will, the chemical villain in affecting silver coins or in affecting silver, not chloride. So it's complex chemistry, but some of them have survived well if they were in the safe or were in anaerobic environments. Others have not survived so well because they were not. They were in a different kind of environment.
Absolutely. Just hard to gauge with all these different factors that come into.
Yeah, it's a very complex place. Again, it's the size of a small town. And so you have a lot of different circumstances that we encountered on the shipwreck.
Absolutely. I think that might be about all the time we have for questions. Bob, do you have any other parting words you'd like to say to the audience?
I can be contacted at my email if you have additional questions. I'd be happy. I like email. I am Evans 1857. So my last name, Evans, followed by 1857 in one string at gmail.com. Write to me. I'd be love to meet you through the internet. It's a fascinating subject. I know a lot about it. I could talk for hours and hours, possibly days. I just shared a few things that I really like today, and I thank you for watching.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all for tuning in to this fantastic presentation. I believe the next hour is about to start, so we will see you all there. And once again, thank you all for stopping by, and thank you, Bob, for presenting.
Thank you a lot for watching. Thanks.